Hey everyone, my name is Yarrow and you're listening to the Daydream Rose podcast. Thank you so much for your patience with this episode. I still kind of felt like I was needing a little bit of a winter break after the holidays, but now I'm really gently and slowly kind of easing myself back into interviewing people and setting interviews up and inviting people and thinking about the solo episodes. And of course, as always, I would love to hear from you if you have any wishes. Today's episode is really beautiful. I'm returning to the book The Artist's Way, and I had the opportunity to talk to Sarah Eliza Kelly about her practice and how this book has changed her perspective on being an artist and making commitments and having these daily practices that can be so beautiful and nourishing. So I'm returning to this book with the support of Sarah's support group, and you can join us as well if you like. It's online on Sundays. We'll meet starting on March 3rd, and it's pretty affordable. So it's 30 to 100 British pounds on a sliding scale, and there's more information in the show notes if you are interested. A quick update from me. I had a bit of a hibernating January and half of February. See, this is how confused I am. After doing quite a big push over the holidays and moving my programs and courses over to Mighty Networks, where we now have a really beautiful network of like-minded people. There's an app through which you can access my courses. The Magic of Embodiment is a year-long program that's kind of halfway now, but you can still join us and you'll get instant access to the first modules. There's the DIY Small Business School that's really thriving, and it's really beautiful to see kind of what everyone is working on and to have this little mastermind where we can support each other and give feedback. So that's still open to you as well. You can join us by becoming a patron, and the link for that is in the show notes as well. Okay, I'm gonna let you enjoy today's show. Everyone, I'm super excited to have a beautiful guest with me today. I'm speaking to Sarah Elisa Kelly.
Hello.
Who I've met on Instagram, like it's often the case, but I'm really excited to speak to her because she's also excited about the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I met Julia Cameron a couple of years ago, and yeah, it really touched me in a way. So I'm super excited to talk today about this practice, the book, movement and embodiment, and all these beautiful things. But first, I'm going to hand it over to you, Sarah, so that you can say hi and let us know where you are in the world and what nature is like around you.
Of course. Hello. I'm really excited you met Julia. I hadn't realized that. We'll have to get onto that story. So I'm sat in my bedroom in central London. I live in a very, very busy street in the middle of Brixton. So there's quite little nature immediately around me. But I have a lot of plants, and I mean a lot of plants. I almost live in a sort of a greenhouse here. So I've got a lot of those around me, and I've got a beautiful blue sky. So that's where I am for now.
I'm in England too at the moment, and I see the same blue sky as we speak, which is quite exciting because so often my guests are very far away, and also it's exciting because it's February in England and blue skies are quite special.
Exactly, and it's really bright. I mean, it's actually sunny, I would say.
Yeah.
So we're fortunate.
Cool. So you are a person of many different exciting practices.
I am, yeah.
And so maybe let's start with what you're most excited about right now. Like, what is part of your everyday life, and what are you seeing as your main thing for 2019?
Sure, okay. Well, it's worth saying that being somebody who's kind of drawn and interested to many different things and many different practices has really had its challenges, particularly I think in a world that encourages us to really focus on one thing and define success as like focusing and going deeper into one thing. I have a writing practice. I work with poetry and language. I have an art practice. I have a movement practice. And I've really been on a journey of self-care. So practices that are relating to my health and my well-being. And it's taken me a very long time actually to come close to the sort of level of daily structure that I feel like I'm more comfortable with now. So I do some journaling in the morning, I do some meditation, I do some free movement practice, just sort of warming up my body however feels good, a little bit of yoga, and then I have some health practices that I'm doing, some supplements that I'm taking for my health, and the structure of having that actually is the thing that I find most exciting these days. I used to have a very long list of things that I wanted to do, or rather that I thought would be really beneficial for me to be doing, and sometimes I use that as a way of feeling guilty for the things that it was never enough. It was never enough what I was doing, and I use a sort of timing method these days, a little bit similar to the Pomodoro method. Have you ever heard of that one?
No, I haven't.
So the Pomodoro method, I'm not quite sure where it originated from, but it's this notion of timing something for, I think it's 25 minutes originally, based on the idea that we sort of focus best for short periods of time. And it's really been a lifesaver for me, because it's made me feel like I can do whatever I'm doing for a short period of time and still feel like I've achieved something. So depending on how much time I have in the morning, I might just be meditating for 5 minutes and writing for 5 minutes and moving for 5 minutes. And if I have a bit longer, then I'll do all of those things for 10 minutes. And I have even longer, I'll do all those things for 20 minutes. But it makes me feel like I can do something very small, even if it's just a short amount of time. It's setting myself up for my day well.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I think it's so funny how we, or I, as a podcast host, so often have this experience that my guests tell me something that I need to hear in that moment, because I was also thinking really hard these last 2 weeks about my daily routines and what I want to invite in and what feels overwhelming, but also everything that I'm so excited about. And I think this boundary of time and being very specific as I approach something and say, okay, this is going to get 5 minutes and then this is going to get 10 minutes or however long I have. Yeah, that's a great idea, because I think sometimes I get up and I'm like, oh gosh, so breakfast is a big deal. Then I really want to walk my dog in like a nice leisurely way that's fun for both of us. And then I want to drink my tea, and then I want to write, and I want to move in some way, and I want to meditate. And it just feels so much, unless you really break it down. So it's a funny thing for me, timing. I've always really resisted structure and yet craved it at the same time. And I'm really entering into the stage of my life where I'm really beginning to understand my own relationship to feeling freedom within structure. And in fact, one of the biggest, actually thinking about it, the biggest changes, particularly in the last 2 years maybe, is really allowing myself rest during the day that's quite short, but really allowing myself to do nothing within it. So I'll even just maybe if I've been outside of the house and when I come back in before I'm doing other tasks, I'll set my timer for 15 minutes and I'll just lie down on my bed and do absolutely nothing. And it's extraordinary how long that 15 minutes feels. You can guarantee that at least once during that time I will have picked up my phone to go, did I accidentally not set the timer? Has it really been an hour? And just giving myself that 10 or 15 minutes of rest actually has given me a huge relaxation and then renewal of energy for whatever it is that I'm doing next. And it's such a short amount of time, but really giving that structure has allowed me actually a lot of freedom within it. So yeah. Oh, I really love that idea. I'm definitely going to try that too.
Yeah, do. You'd be surprised. The brain also just thinks it's been much longer. It has to be much longer. Surely I've been sleeping for a whole hour.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's crazy how little actually it takes for me to really, really allow my body to come into a much more relaxed state. But just by really giving myself the gift of that structure.
Especially without your phone, it is so fucking tempting to just say, okay, I have 10 minutes, but in the end I'm going to sit down or lie down, but I'm just going to scroll on my phone.
Yeah, and that's for me, I do that all the time. And the difference in the kind of rest that I feel in my body when it's unstimulated versus when it's stimulated in some way with digital. So the same, if I just have like an hour and all I'm doing is really just drinking tea, just drinking tea, or maybe even listening to something on the radio, I feel much calmer afterwards. And actually, if I've spent that hour on the internet in some way, even if it's just been doing pleasurable things, the level of stimulation that I feel when I'm relaxing, it's really hard, I think, to carve out these spaces in our day where we're actually not having any kind of stimulation. And I certainly need them, and I think need them more and more and more as I go through life.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Yeah. So much of what you're talking about also makes me feel that you're making a lot of space for your creative practice, which is really beautiful.
Yeah.
So I think that is a beautiful bridge to maybe touch on the book that we both love, which is The Artist's Way.
Yeah.
And I just would love to hear like how you first came across it and how it has affected you and how you're working with it now.
Yeah, okay, great. So it's funny because when you use that word, the book we both love, there's I can almost feel there's something in my body going, do I love it? Do I love it? I think I have an interesting, almost like love-hate relationship with it. But that's why I think it's so special and so important. And that's also interesting for me as somebody that facilitates Artist Way groups. And I find it refreshing to actually really just own that honesty of saying, I love this book and I can't get behind every single word that she says in it. Some of it I find a bit triggering. Some of it I find a bit outdated. And yet there's something in the core of it that I really feel is valuable and worthwhile in the sorts of questions that she's asking of us. So yeah, I came across the book probably about 7 years ago, maybe even 8 years ago. It was on a friend's bookshelf, and I picked it up and flicked through it, and then, as happens I think for many people, it was on another friend's bookshelf, and then another friend's bookshelf. Came into my awareness through feeling like it was something that other people had and knew about. But really nobody had actually done it. It was, I think it's also so funny, the way that many people within my circles, at least, my friendship circles, know about the book, maybe have it, maybe have tried it, but very few have finished it. I think I've met before just one person who did it all the way through on her own. And I was just so impressed by that. So yeah, I was curious about it for a while. It was in my awareness, but I hadn't tried it. And then one day I ended up borrowing it, and I was thinking just before we had this conversation, there's a high probability that the book that I own is actually still belongs to a friend of mine. I borrowed, and I think that's still their book. And I had it again for like 2 years on my bookshelf. Maybe got to like chapter 2, did some exercises, and then began like, flicking, skipping bits, picking out the bits that I wanted to do and not the rest, and then leaving it, giving up. And then around about, must have been sort of 3 years ago now, 3-4 years ago, I had started a PhD that I'm just finishing off at the moment. And I'm studying at the Royal College of Art. I'm doing a PhD in fine art practice, and I don't have any background in art. So I was feeling like such a level of fraudulence, imposter syndrome, which I've had in the creative arts all my life. I feel like a really strong sense of I'm not allowed to be here in some way. And somebody suggested like looking at that sort of imposter feeling that I was struggling so much with through the Artist's Way. And I decided that it was something that I wanted to do. And I just knew from the beginning that I needed support in order to do that. So I gathered a group of people from my movement community together and said, who's interested? Let's do this together. And we met in person before a weekly class that we were going to, a weekly 5 rhythms dance class. We met in the park beforehand. It was over a summer. And we just shared our journey and just sort of sat with each other through these 12 weeks. And that experience, it was a combination of what was happening within the book and what was happening through the process of being on a journey with others doing the same thing. It was both of those elements were just life-changing, really. And for many of the people in that circle, big changes for all of us. And that was really the beginning. Yeah, that was the beginning of my path with the Artist's Way.
That's beautiful. And I relate to so much of what you said of like, it is a really complex book and I can't get behind every single word either. And I think also it is a little bit older, I can't remember exactly when it was published, but I think, in some ways it does feel dated. In other ways, it feels incredibly revolutionary. And I think I really found refuge in this book in a way that I had often tried to seek refuge in religion or spirituality. Like I don't have a religious background, but I remember as a teenager being really interested in other religions and like almost wishing that I had come from a religious background because I really wanted this deep sense of devotion that the book is speaking to, and to have something that would give me this freedom within structure that we have talked about before in the beginning of this. And I think to me that is the power of the book, that if you're open to this and if it's something that you need at this point in your life, it can create such a beautiful container for really deep questions and can really provide a safe space for you to open up in that way. But it's also really, really hard work. It's really, really hard work.
It is. And it's hard and it's as much as you want it to be. I always try and I think for me, people that I've met, so the reason I then continued on the journey with then going on to sort of support other groups going through the book was because I met so many people who would always be saying, "Oh, I tried it, and then I got to here, and then I couldn't, and then I gave up, and then I got to here," and I think it feels like a huge commitment because it is both time-wise and emotion-wise. Like it asks us challenging questions of ourselves. But I also really would promote this sense of the permission to go as much or as little into it. I just really believe that we're all at different stages of needing different things from these sorts of containers, and I think it's as valuable to go through all 12 weeks and just be doing one out of the 5 tasks, let's say, and not feeling like the only way that we can do it or the only way that we can really engage is if we take 12 weeks off work and devote ourselves entirely to it, which it isn't practical for many of us. But I really resonate with what you say about that feeling of a deeper connection to spirit in some way. It's something that I try and explore the ways that we can find our own individual relationship to the notion of some of the things that she's talking about. So she's quite quick to use words like God, which for me, growing up in actually a very atheist background, that was really challenging to begin with, really challenging. And I had a friend who, in the group when I was first doing it, who said, just substitute it for something else that works for you. And I've always then carried that advice to others in terms of, saying the force that life wants to bring through you, or coming into your own relationship with it. I think she's working in a very similar way to the 12-step programs. Do you know much about them?
Not a ton, but a little bit.
I'm the same. I don't know so much, but I know that there's a spiritual aspect to that, but in my understanding it's a spiritual, it's a connection to spirit that has, that's the container, but there's the freedom within it to find what that means for you. You know, we're not talking about a Christian God in the way that many of us have been brought up with. And the space for every part of that spectrum, whether that's atheism, agnostic, or whatever language for God, you know, might work for you. And there's beauty in that as well, I think, in really exploring some of these deeper philosophical, existential questions as creativity, you know, as life force, eros, or whatever, you know, whatever framing you want to find that in.
Yeah, totally. Yes, and I also loved what you said in the beginning, about, like, you know, what we need from this container might really change over time, and it is totally okay to dip into it and see what feels good right now and what you can actually make time for. I also think that just starting the morning pages can make a huge difference in one's life in itself, and it really doesn't have to take long. Like, I know it really changed everything for me, and I really want to come back to them now. So yeah.
I think it's both. There's something about both being able to dip in, and by which I mean, like, being able to dip in and out and not having to feel like, you know, you can't try it, you can't join if you can't, you know, you can't do it if you can't do all of it. And yet at the same time, for me, there was also great healing in actually committing to, I'm going to start and I'm going to end. Because before that, and with many things actually, I've had this idea of myself as somebody who has the intention to do something, you know, and maybe we'll start it and then it will go away for years, and that's okay too. But for me, there was a huge amount of potency in beginning, seeing it through, and ending. It felt like even if, you know, I mean, the first time I did it, I really wasn't taking on the full quantity of the tasks that she offers, but I stayed and I sat, you know. It was like they say with meditation, it's the turning up for ourselves by sitting on the cushion, or by she talks about turning up on the page for the morning pages. Even if you're writing, you know, 3 words instead of 3 pages, it's the doing of it again and again and again, and staying with ourselves to completion of, you know, really going through the course and ending it, that I felt such a sense of achievement at the end of it, in a way that I hadn't felt for almost anything in my life, including, you know, university degrees. I hadn't really felt like achievement in the same way. It was quite extraordinary. And then there was something about this feeling of, wow, I gave that to myself, you know, I did that for myself. And the things that I had to show at the end of it, you know, it wasn't a certificate or something like that, but it was much deeper.
Oh, I think again that was just what I needed to hear as I'm as I'm embarking another 12 weeks myself. Yeah, I think you're totally right. I want to kind of circle back a little bit on what the morning pages actually are, because some listeners might not know. So can you maybe recap that for us?
Yeah, so she asks us to bring this thing called the morning pages into daily practice. She says 3 pages. What I like about that is, depending on the size of your notebook, 3 pages can mean different things. She does suggest 3 A4 sides.
Oh, really? I thought it was A5. Oh, God.
Or I think so. Maybe I'll have to check that. My reading of it was 3 sides.
Okay.
But to be honest with you, I have a particular size of I have a moleskin. What size is it? It's like a square. It's definitely smaller than A4. And I've always done my 3 on there. And yeah, I've seen friends do on even smaller. But I think the idea is that you're using these 3 pages basically for stream of consciousness writing in the morning. And at particular points in the book, she's asking maybe more directed questions for reflection in those pages. So it might be, you know, use your pages this morning to think about your relationship to this part of your creativity, or something like that. But on the whole, it's an unstructured stream of consciousness writing. and then you're supposed to, you know, not go back and look at them for a while. So it's not about writing something that would ever be read by anybody else other than yourself. And the potency, the power in that for me has been really getting to know the voices inside my head, you know, really allowing myself to write through boredom, allowing myself to write through, you know, self-doubt of what the hell am I doing? I'm tired. I don't know what I'm writing about. And then noticing the more that you do it, what I find, which is why I think actually having a little bit, you know, actually going to A4 pages can be a really amazing thing, because it takes me a while to get through all of that mud, really, of the beginning of not really having anything to say. And then all sorts of interesting conversations will come out of me, and some of it quite shocking, you know, for its cuttingness. It's you know, I really encounter my critic on the page, in the morning pages, the part of me that feels like I'm not good enough, that I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, and the language that I notice myself using sometimes is quite illuminating and beautiful, because it then allows me to really see what's going on inside my head, and it's brought so much more compassion for myself, so much more recognition of oh yeah, that's that voice that comes in and says this at particular moments like this, or oh yeah, that's the desire that's still there, longing for something underneath, and oh, that's the small part of me that feels embarrassed or ashamed. So it's really helped me to acknowledge, sort of sift through different parts of myself, and bring more compassion to myself and awareness in that process. And again, I think it's worth saying that for different people, it's that, you know, the morning pages are offering very different things, and we all have our own personal relationship to them. For me, it's really been around finding out more about myself, and hearing myself speak, and bringing more compassion to myself through that.
Yes. Oh yes. Yes.
I don't know for you. I don't know if you have a different experience.
I mean, everything you said, and also I think at the moment what I feel quite strongly is this feeling very soothing that I'm being listened to, even if it's just by myself, you know. Like I feel with what's happening in the world, we're also overloaded, and I feel like there's like a real need to make intentional space to listen to each other. And also, in addition to that, it feels really good to make that space for myself and be consistent in that way, because it is just not always practical to, you know, have a or several relationships in your life where you can be listened to for an hour every single day, you know. And so that feels really good. And then the other thing I feel is also seeing the patterns in my life a lot more clearly. So I'm allowing myself to complain if I need to, and also I can step back and see, oh wow, I've been talking about this shit for 3 weeks now. Am I actually doing it? You know. And I think without morning pages, I could go much longer without taking action in a direction that feels better, and that doesn't make it easier, but it definitely brings more clarity and awareness quicker, I think.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I agree.
The other practice that Julia is recommending are artist states, which are also really beautiful. And I would love to hear kind of what they look like for you and how they've changed things.
Yeah, of course. So the artist state, I think, in some ways, for me personally, even more than the morning pages, was just revolutionary. I think because I had some sort of journaling practice before the morning pages. So while it was new for me, it wasn't so unfamiliar. It wasn't so out of my comfort zone. But the artist state, which is, you know, asking yourself to take yourself out, give yourself time to nourish and nurture yourself in some creative way, but that's very flexible what that might mean, has really been an extraordinary gift of permission for me. So while I'm somebody that's very independent, I've traveled a lot on my own, and so I've done lots of things on my own when I've been in situations where I've had to, let's say, out of, in another country backpacking, I found it very easy to go out for dinner on my own.
Mm-hmm.
But in my home environment, here in the UK, I think particularly actually also as a woman, I've never found it an easy thing to go and do something on my own. It's felt like a failing in some way, or I've received some kind of information culturally that doing it on my own has meant that I've not succeeded at socially enough, that I don't have a friend to do it with. And that was quite a big revelation for me, because like I said, I think of myself as someone who's really independent, but I hadn't gone to the cinema on my own before I did an artist date. I'd always looked for a friend to go with, and that meant that actually I'd often denied myself things without really realizing it, but I denied myself opportunities to really just give myself what I was asking for. So yeah, going little things like that, going to the cinema on my own, or going to a gallery to see an exhibition on my own. They sound like such straightforward things, but yeah, I would say, 5 years ago, it was completely unheard of that I would feel a level of, maybe it's confidence, self-confidence to really feel comfortable being able to do that. I love now, I go for lots of walks on my own. I will go out for dinner on my own occasionally, usually not to, really fancy restaurants or something like that, but, sitting with a book on my own in a cafe, really giving myself time for myself without feeling like I'm waiting for somebody else, or I've not succeeded in that day because somebody else isn't there with me. And for many people that might sound like the most normal thing in the world, but for me it just really wasn't. It just wasn't something that I'd experienced before. So yeah, I've had all sorts of beautiful experiences of, I have a book of London walks that takes you to different interesting parts of London, and I'll often go out at a weekend and follow that and find an old church that's got some kind of historic significance, or some landmark somewhere, and go exploring. And then also going to the theatre, or going to a music concert or something. Things that I'm also doing with friends, but that I'm giving myself the permission to also do on my own more often. I wouldn't say I do it weekly anymore, but the times when I was doing it weekly, I just felt such a sense of connection to myself, and a flourishing in my independence and self-confidence, for sure.
Yeah, that's beautiful to hear. Yes. I would love to, before we go, kind of maybe come back to movement and embodiment, because I know these are really important parts of your creativity as well. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I've been dancing a practice called the 5 Rhythms for around about just over 10 years now. I started when I was living in Brighton, where you are, and it really has been a very, very healing and therapeutic journey for me. So it was a practice that asks us to come into our bodies and to find ourselves as we are in any moment to moment through our bodies, and bring it into movement. So it's a free movement practice. There's no steps to learn. It's just exploring ourselves and expressing ourselves through movement. And I then carried on in that practice, and later moved my focus into something called movement medicine, which is rooted in 5 rhythms, and then is developed into really connecting us deeper into a sense of spirit, of environment, of community. It's somewhere between social justice and embodiment and personal. It's not a therapy, but it's definitely a therapeutic tool for learning to be with ourselves. And it's really based in this idea that we are all in movement. You know, if we weren't moving, we wouldn't be alive. Our breath is movement, and the rhythms and patterns of our movement, the way that our energies rise and fall, just like the seasons are turning, encountering ourselves as this landscape of movement can really invite us into emotional states within ourselves. And all sorts of states within ourselves, physical sensations, thoughts, this connection between our body and our heart and mind, that when it can come into an alignment through just increased sitting with ourselves, being with ourselves, moving with ourselves, has likewise just created extraordinary shifts and changes in my life. And it's my core practice now. I've just finished my movement medicine teacher training, so I'm moving into more offerings in movement, and looking for bridges or for ways to open some of these teachings out to people who maybe have some knowledge of somatic or embodiment work, but wouldn't really feel comfortable in a sort of ecstatic dance environment. So it's somewhere in between, you know. There's I mean, it's extraordinary, really, I think, at the moment, the emergence of ecstatic dance, conscious dance activities. It seems to be, you know, it's being discussed almost as like the new yoga. I've seen a lot around this, and movement medicine has a very particular place within that. It's a very deeply rooted in the earth practice. It's really not about escaping the body, but coming deeper and deeper into the body and through the body, and encountering ourselves and encountering the world in that way. It's based in well, not based in, it's very informed by Gestalt psychotherapy. It's got a lot of interesting anthropological roots, and I'm a really really big advocate for it. There's 100 things I could say, but
yeah, that sounds incredible. I am definitely gonna come up to a workshop in London sometime.
I'd love to.
I haven't seen anything that I felt really drawn to in terms of 5 rhythms or movement medicine in Brighton, but I feel, well, I also really feel shy, if I'm very honest.
Yeah. It's a really common thing. I think movement, well, for me, actually, movement voice, you know, voice in some way, singing or music kinds of things, like all parts of our creativity, like they're hugely vulnerable. Like they can make us feel extraordinarily vulnerable.
Okay, but yes, hearing you speak about this, I'm like, yes, I think that is the next step. I'm gonna have a look. Thank you so much.
There's a lot there, you know, and sometimes it's just finding your way into where feels right. I actually have a beautiful story. The one person that I know that I said finished the whole of the Artist's Way, did it all on her own, is a 5 rhythms teacher. And one of her first artist dates that she gave to herself was to go to a 5 rhythms class. So she went to her first class, and then, you know, many years later through the Artist's Way, and then many years later is a 5 rhythms teacher. So it has it has big changes. There are big changes that happen when we give ourselves the permission to just say, do you know what, I really want to do that thing and I'm scared, but I really want to try it. And importantly, when we then can come back to others and say, hey, I did this thing, you know, and others can gather around us and go, yeah, we support you, we're behind you.
Totally. That reminds me also about what you said earlier about the sense of achievement and how that's often not coming from these big institutionalized certified things that we're doing, interestingly, but that so often these practices where really we're just showing up for ourselves rather than anyone else giving us approval are the things that we can really feel proud of and like sink into this feeling of achievement that we're often kind of not allowing ourselves in other ways. So
for sure.
That's
and
really
to be witnessed by others doing that, I think you know, the power of feeling the validation of another that is a non, the beauty of actually getting together with strangers, with people that we don't know, but we're on that same journey or doing something together, like in the support group. We're witnessing each other as we move and change, and so there's this deep holding of validation for who we are and celebration for who we are that we can also share with each other, and we can like fill our cups through each other in that way. And I found that practice of leaning more into others actually a really beautiful thing as well, in helping me to change some of the ways that I'm talking to myself, so allowing me to validate myself, because I'm supported also in really learning to listen to others when they say, wow, yay, you did this thing, you went to that dance class. It helps us to celebrate ourselves when we're also celebrating each other.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So you touched on a group already. I would love to hear what you're currently offering. How can people join, and where can they find out more?
Thank you. Yeah. So at the moment I'm offering, starting on the 3rd of March, just ready for spring, an online support group for the Artist's Way. So we'll be gathering together in a small group of people to go through the book together, and I'll be just gently facilitating that. So it's the first time that I'll be doing it as an online group. But that feels really exciting for me as well. I think, again, it's hopefully encouraging people who might feel like they don't have access to that in their own communities, or maybe don't feel like they have the time to meet in person. It's using, the incredible technologies that we have access to these days to come into connection at a distance. So we'll be meeting once a week to have a check-in, which is what she talks about in the book. She also suggests in the book actually to really gather with others to do it as a support. So we'll have this check-in once a week, and then we'll go off in the week and do our own reading of the chapter, do the tasks. I'll be sending an encouragement email during the week, and then we'll meet together on Sunday evening to just check in and see what the week's been like for us, see what progress we've made, what challenges we've had, and just allow our reflections and sharings to support each other. So I have a sign up page on my Instagram and on my Facebook. We can put all of that information in the notes. Is that right?
Of course, yes.
Great.
Yes.
And it's on a contribution basis, trying to make it as accessible as possible based on the comfort of your based on your wages, your earning. And we start on the 3rd. It's actually going to be 13 weeks because we want to give time to just to have an introduction session. And
Yeah, if that's cool, I would love to let people know how much it is, because I feel really, really honored. Like, it's incredibly accessible, and I just feel so grateful that you're offering it the way you are. So let's let people know about that.
Say that. Yeah, okay. So it's £30 for sort of unwaged or concessions, £50 if you're on a low wage, 70 if you feel in a comfortable wage, and it's £100 if you feel capable of giving that and supporting me to develop this work and to give more offerings. So, and that's including all of the 13 weeks, the hour sessions, one encouragement email a week, and I also have a PDF of the book available if that's needed as well.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's incredibly generous, and I will be taking part of it.
You will be.
I'm really excited. So it's going to be, I think, a beautiful way to meet some new people. I'm really, really excited to see who's going to show up, and would love to be in dialogue with people about what's coming up for them, and also have this gentle accountability of really, really going through it this time by myself, with my not by myself, but in the group and by myself. And
that's a really amazing, I think that's a great phrasing of it, this gentle accountability. It's just this way of like lifting us up, supporting us, helping us to hold each other in a gentle and encouraging and celebratory way.
Yeah. Sarah, thank you so, so much. It was really beautiful to talk to you. I'm very, very excited to share this episode and your work in general with everyone. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and for sharing so much.
Thank you. No, it was beautiful to talk to you.